The morning sun glinted off the pristine glass walls of the Cascade Summit Resort, nestled among the redwoods of Northern California. Maya Johnson adjusted her standard-issue gray uniform in the employee locker room, tucking a loose strand of her tightly coiled hair back into place. At 32, she'd mastered the art of invisibility, a skill that came with wearing a maid's uniform in spaces where people like her weren't meant to succeed. "They're saying this is the most important tech summit of the year," whispered Tina, another housekeeper, as she tied her apron. 20 CEOs in the grand ballroom for 3 days straight. Management wants everything perfect. Maya nodded, her expression neutral despite the flutter of interest in her chest. She'd learned long ago to keep her fascinations private. "Just means more coffee runs and extra trash to empty," she replied with practiced indifference. What she didn't say was how her heart still raced at the mention of tech summits. There had been a time 6 years ago when she'd been on track to attend such events as a presenter, not as the person clearing away half-empty water glasses. As Maya pushed her cart toward the grand ballroom, she mentally recited what she knew about the summit from overheard conversations and glimpses of schedules. Azimuth Technologies had gathered the industry's top minds to solve a critical algorithm failure in their global financial processing system, a failure costing them millions daily. The massive double doors to the ballroom were propped open when Maya arrived. Inside, clusters of men in expensive suits circled the room, their voices carrying the distinctive timbre of authority. Only 3 women were present among the executives, all of them dressed in power suits that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. At the center of the room stood Gregory Phillips, CEO of Azimuth, his silver hair perfectly styled, his frustration barely contained behind a politician's smile. Behind him, covering the entire wall, was a whiteboard filled with line after line of complex code. "Ladies and gentlemen," Phillips announced, silencing the room with his baritone voice, "thank you for accepting our invitation on such short notice. As you know, 6 days ago, our primary transaction algorithm began failing at random intervals. Despite our best efforts, we haven't isolated the issue." Maya kept her eyes down as she moved along the perimeter of the room, collecting discarded coffee cups from the breakfast service. She'd become expert at making herself nearly invisible, moving efficiently without drawing attention. "The situation is dire," Phillips continued. "We're losing approximately $87 million each day this continues. Our internal team has worked around the clock without success." A tall, lean man with a British accent interrupted. "That's why you've brought us here? Your team couldn't handle it, so you expect us, your competitors, to bail you out?" Phillips smiled tightly. "Alexander, Azimuth processes 40% of global financial transactions. If we fail, the ripple effects hit everyone in this room. That's why I've offered a $50 million consulting fee to whoever helps us solve this." Maya's hand trembled slightly as she reached for an empty cup. $50 million. The number echoed in her mind, carrying with it images of the life she'd once dreamed of. "Show us what you've got so far," demanded Eliza Chen, the razor-sharp CEO of Rapid Core Solutions, her sleek bob swinging as she approached the whiteboard. For the next hour, Maya moved methodically around the room as the executives debated, argued, and postulated. Though her body performed its routine tasks, her mind was elsewhere, absorbing every word, following each thread of logic, mentally untangling the problem they were struggling to solve. 6 years ago, she would have been standing at a whiteboard just like this one, before life in Lagos had collapsed around her, before she'd fled Nigeria with nothing but her credentials and hope, before she'd discovered that an MIT doctorate in computational mathematics meant little when paired with an accent and dark skin and no work visa. "This section here," said a heavyset man Maya recognized as Warren Huffman from StreamTech, pointing at the lower quadrant of code. "The recursive function is calling back to a database that's obviously corrupted." "Obviously not," snapped Eliza. "The database is fine. The problem is in how the algorithm is processing mixed currency transactions." As the debate grew heated, Maya found herself drawn closer to the whiteboard. The pattern was emerging now, familiar in its complexity, yet clearly flawed in a way that tickled at the edges of her consciousness. "Excuse me, miss," called out a voice, startling her. She turned to find Alexander Whitman, the British CEO, holding up an empty coffee cup. "Could we get a fresh round? This may take a while since Phillips's team has made such a mess of things." Several chuckles rippled through the room. Maya nodded, quickly collecting the cups on her cart. As she turned to leave, her eyes caught on a particular segment of code in the upper right corner of the board. There, Almost hidden among the elegant syntax was a tiny anomaly, a missing condition statement that would cause the exact symptoms they were describing. She hesitated, her training from another lifetime urging her to speak, while her survival instinct commanded silence. 6 years of learning to be invisible warred against the mathematician that still lived somewhere deep inside her. Something amusing about our predicament? It was Phillips, his tone sharp as he noticed her lingering gaze. "No, sir. I'll get your coffee right away," Maya replied, keeping her voice soft, eyes downcast. "Wait," said Eliza Chen, narrowing her eyes. "You were looking at the code. Why?" Maya felt 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, the weight of their attention almost suffocating. "I was just cleaning up, ma'am." "No, you were reading it," insisted Eliza. "I saw your eyes tracking the functions." Warren Huffman laughed loudly. "Come on, Chen. You think the Maid is going to solve what 20 of the world's best tech minds can't figure out?" More laughter joined his, spreading through the room like a wave. Maya's cheeks burned as she gripped the handle of her cart more tightly, willing herself to move toward the door. Alexander Whitman smirked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Well, if you're so smart, then solve it." The mockery in his tone ignited something in Maya, a spark of the person she'd been before circumstance had beaten her down. Before she could reconsider, words escaped her lips. "The conditional statement in the currency conversion module is missing its exception, handling for non-standard monetary formats," she said quietly, her Nigerian accent more pronounced under stress. The room fell instantly silent. "What did you say?" Phillips asked, his voice tight with disbelief. Maya swallowed hard, knowing she'd crossed a line but unable to retreat. She pointed to the upper section of the board. "There. When the algorithm encounters a currency format it doesn't recognize, there's no exception handler. It should validate the format before processing, but that condition is missing." Gregory Phillips stared at her, then at the board, then back at her. The silence in the room grew heavier with each passing second. "That's..." Alexander Whitman began dismissively, then stopped as he squinted at the code. "That's actually..." Eliza Chen had already moved to the whiteboard, her eyes scanning the section Maya had indicated. "She's right," she said, her voice tinged with astonishment. "There's a missing validation check. The system wouldn't know how to handle certain currency inputs." The room erupted in a flurry of activity as executives rushed to the board, examining the code through new eyes. Maya stood frozen, her cart forgotten, as Phillips grabbed a marker and quickly added the missing condition statement. "This could be it," he muttered, then turned to Maya with undisguised shock. "How did you see that? Who are you?" Before she could answer, Warren Huffman cut in, probably just repeated something she heard from the actual programmers, he said dismissively, though his confidence had visibly wavered. "No," Eliza Chen countered, studying Maya with intense curiosity. "That observation required understanding the entire system architecture. You can't just parrot that." She stepped closer to Maya. "What's your name?" "Maya Johnson," she replied, her voice steadier now despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "And where did you learn to read advanced algorithmic code, Ms. Johnson?" Phillips asked, his earlier condescension replaced by genuine interest. Maya looked around at the circle of powerful people now focused entirely on her, the same people who had looked through her just moments before. In that moment, she made a decision. After years of hiding, of diminishing herself to survive, perhaps it was finally time to be seen. "I have a doctorate in computational mathematics from MIT," she said, straightening her shoulders slightly. "Before that, I was the top mathematics student at the University of Lagos." The silence that followed was profound. Maya could almost see the recalculations happening behind their eyes, assumptions being discarded, new assessments forming. "Get Ms. Chen a secure laptop," Phillips ordered an assistant. "Let's test this correction immediately." As the room burst into activity again, Maya felt a strange lightness spreading through her chest. She didn't know what would happen next, couldn't predict how this moment would change her carefully constructed life. But for the first time in 6 years, she had allowed herself to be truly seen. And in the reflection of their stunned expressions, she caught a glimpse of who she had once been, who she perhaps could be again. The next hour passed in a blur of activity as Maya found herself abruptly transplanted from the margins of the room to its center. Phillips had insisted she remain while they tested her solution, her cleaning cart abandoned by the door like a discarded identity. "The patch is compiling now," announced a harried IT specialist who had been summoned from Azimuth's local office. "We should know in a few minutes if it resolves the issue." Maya stood awkwardly beside the central conference table, hyper-aware of her gray uniform among their tailored suits. She could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. The contrast between who they thought she was and who she actually was hung in the air like an unasked question. "While we wait," Eliza Chen said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "I'm curious about your story, Dr. Johnson." She emphasized the title deliberately, sending a pointed message to everyone in the room. Maya hesitated. 6 years of carefully guarded privacy warred against the sudden opportunity to reclaim her voice. "It's a long story," she said finally. "We've got time," Phillips replied, glancing at his watch. $50 million worth of time, potentially. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room, but Maya didn't smile. "I came to America 6 years ago from Nigeria. Political instability made it impossible to continue my research there." What she didn't say was how she'd fled in the night after receiving death threats for speaking out against corruption at the university. How she'd arrived in Boston believing her credentials would open doors, only to find those doors firmly shut without the right connections or immigration status. "With your qualifications, you could work anywhere in tech," Alexander Whitman observed, his earlier mockery tempered but not entirely absent. "Why are you?" He gestured vaguely at her uniform, not finishing the sentence. "Immigration complications," Maya replied simply, unwilling to detail her full vulnerability to these strangers. "And once you're out of the field for a while, getting back in becomes increasingly difficult." This, too, was only a fraction of the truth. She'd been caught in a bureaucratic nightmare, her asylum application trapped in processing limbo, unable to work legally in her field while she waited. By the time her work authorization finally came through, years had passed, and potential employers saw only the gap in her resume rather than her potential. The cleaning job had been meant as temporary. Then her mother back home had fallen ill, requiring expensive treatments that Maya's meager savings couldn't cover. The modest but reliable income from housekeeping, supplemented by under-the-table tutoring, kept the remittances flowing home. Dreams of returning to her field had gradually been replaced by the pragmatic rhythm of survival. "System test complete," the IT specialist announced, breaking into Maya's thoughts. All heads turned toward him as he stared at his screen, his expression shifting from concentration to disbelief. It's working. The transactions are processing correctly across all test scenarios." Phillips exhaled sharply. "Run it again. Different parameters." Tension crackled in the room as they watched the specialist's fingers flying over the keyboard. After another minute, he looked up with a stunned expression. "Confirmed. The correction is holding across all test environments. The missing exception handler was the problem." The revelation struck the room like a physical force. 20 of the most brilliant tech minds in the world had been stumped by a problem that a hotel maid had solved with a single glance. "Unbelievable," muttered Warren Huffman, though his tone suggested he was still trying very hard not to believe it. Phillips turned to Maya, reassessing her with calculating eyes. "Dr. Johnson, I believe we need to have a conversation about your future." "Greg, you can't be serious," Warren interjected. "One lucky observation doesn't qualify." "Lucky?" Eliza Chen cut in sharply. "That lucky observation just saved Azimuth nearly $100 million. I'd call that extremely qualified." She turned to Maya with newfound respect. "And I'd be interested in discussing opportunities at Rapid Core, if you're considering options." Maya felt a sudden vertigo as the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. After years of closed doors and unanswered applications, she now had two industry giants expressing interest within seconds of each other. The irony wasn't lost on her, how her value had changed in their eyes while she remained exactly the same person. "I appreciate the offers," she said carefully, "but this is all very sudden." "Sudden or not," Phillips replied, "talent like yours shouldn't be pushing a cleaning cart. My office will draw up a consulting agreement for today's contribution, and we can discuss a more permanent arrangement after the summit concludes." Before Maya could respond, the doors to the ballroom opened, and the resort's manager appeared, his face a mask of professional concern as he surveyed the scene. "Is everything all right here, Mr. Phillips? I was informed that one of our staff members was." He trailed off as he noticed Maya standing among the executives. "Everything is excellent, actually," Phillips replied smoothly. "Ms. Johnson here has just solved our algorithm crisis. In fact, she'll be joining us as a consultant for the remainder of the summit." The manager's expression cycled rapidly from confusion to disbelief to forced accommodation. "I see. Well, that's unexpected. Maya, why don't you take the rest of the day to prepare?" Eliza suggested. I imagine you'll want to change before rejoining us for the afternoon session. The implication was clear. The maid's uniform had no place in their professional circle. Maya felt a flicker of indignation, but it was overwhelmed by practical considerations. If she was really going to step back into her former world, she would need to look the part. "Thank you," she said, glancing at the resort manager. "If that's possible?" Still visibly processing this extraordinary turn of events, the manager nodded. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." As Maya moved toward the door, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Alexander Whitman, his expression complex with embarrassment and admiration. "Dr. Johnson," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology for my behavior earlier." She met his eyes steadily. "Yes, you do." Without waiting for his response, she continued out of the ballroom, holding herself with dignity despite the trembling in her legs. Only once she was alone in the service corridor did she allow herself to lean against the wall, breathing deeply as the magnitude of what had just occurred washed over her. 3 hours later, Maya stood before the mirror in her small studio apartment, 15 minutes from the resort. She'd dug through her closet to find the one professional outfit she still owned, a navy blue pantsuit purchased years ago for job interviews that had led nowhere. It was slightly outdated and a bit loose on her frame, which had grown leaner with the physical demands of housekeeping. But it was all she had. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Tina. "Everyone's talking about what happened. Is it true? Did you really school those big shots?" Maya smiled faintly as she typed back, "Long story. I'll explain later." She ran her hands down the front of her jacket, smoothing invisible wrinkles. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange, an echo of who she'd been before, yet marked by the years between. She wondered if she could truly step back into that world after so long away. More importantly, she wondered if she wanted to. The past 6 years hadn't been what she'd planned, but they'd shaped her in unexpected ways. She'd learned resilience from the immigrant community that had taken her in when she had nothing. She'd gained perspective from witnessing how the wealthy and powerful moved through the world, oblivious to those who served them. She'd developed patience and humility that her ambitious younger self had lacked. Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. "Dr. Johnson, a car has been arranged to bring you back to the resort. It should arrive in approximately 10 minutes. Gregory Phillips." Maya took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the full weight of who she was, not just the brilliant mathematician from Lagos or the invisible maid, but the woman who had survived becoming both. The afternoon session was already underway when Maya returned to the grand ballroom. A security guard who had previously ignored her existence now held the door open with deference. Inside, the room had been reconfigured with a large oval table at the center, surrounded by the 20 executives who had witnessed her revelation that morning. Phillips noticed her immediately and stood. "Ah, Dr. Johnson, please join us. We've saved you a seat." All eyes turned to her as she walked toward the empty chair beside Phillips. Gone were the maid's sensible shoes and gray uniform, replaced by a professional suit and the quiet confidence of someone reclaiming her rightful place. She could read the reassessment in their expressions, how the change in her appearance helped bridge the cognitive dissonance of accepting her as a peer. "We were just discussing the broader implications of the algorithm failure," Phillips explained as she sat down. "Beyond the immediate fix, we need to implement systemic changes to prevent similar issues." Maya nodded, taking in the diagrams displayed on the screen at the front of the room. "You're looking at restructuring the entire validation architecture," she observed. "Exactly," Eliza confirmed. The missing exception handler was symptomatic of a larger problem in how the system processes unconventional inputs. For the next hour, Maya listened more than she spoke, absorbing the discussion while mapping it against her own understanding of complex systems. The dynamics around the table fascinated her, how alliances formed and dissolved around different proposals, how certain voices commanded more attention than others regardless of the quality of their ideas. Warren Huffman remained skeptical of her presence, addressing his comments to everyone but her. Alexander Whitman, perhaps compensating for his earlier behavior, went out of his way to seek her opinion. Eliza Chen treated her with professional respect, while simultaneously asserting her own authority in the field. During a brief break, Maya made her way to the refreshment table where she found herself standing beside a tall, slender woman she recognized as Diane Rodriguez, CEO of Meridian Software. "I've been watching you," Rodriguez said without preamble, stirring her coffee. "You have remarkable instincts for someone who's been out of the industry for 6 years." Maya selected a bottle of water, unsurprised that Rodriguez had researched her background during the break. "The fundamentals don't change," she replied. "Only the applications evolve." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "True. But tell me, how does it feel to go from serving these people coffee to sitting at their table?" The question caught Maya off guard with its directness. "Illuminating," she answered after a moment. "I've seen both sides of the power dynamic now." "And what have you learned from that perspective?" Maya considered the question carefully. "That brilliance and opportunity aren't as connected as people like to believe. That invisibility can be both a burden and an advantage, and that most people's sense of who belongs in which role is far too rigid." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Interesting. I suspect that dual perspective could be extremely valuable in the right context." She handed Maya a business card. "When you're weighing your options after today, I hope you'll consider Meridian. We could use someone who sees what others miss, both in code and in people." Before Maya could respond, Phillips called the group back to order. As she returned to her seat, Maya noticed several of the executives watching her with calculating expressions. The morning's revelation had transformed her from invisible to valuable in their eyes, and now she represented an asset to be acquired. The remainder of the session focused on implementing her solution across Azimuth's global infrastructure. As the discussion grew increasingly technical, Maya found herself drawn more actively into the conversation, her expertise becoming evident despite her years away from the field. "The implementation plan looks solid," she commented, reviewing the proposal on the screen. "But you'll need to consider the legacy systems in developing markets. They won't process the new validation protocols without additional middleware." Phillips frowned. "Our market penetration in developing regions is minimal. Is it worth the additional complexity? Those regions are precisely where non-standard currency formatting is most common," Maya countered, thinking of the financial systems she'd navigated in West Africa. "They're also your fastest-growing markets. Ignoring their infrastructure needs now will only create larger problems later." Her comment sparked a heated debate about resource allocation and market priorities. Maya listened as executives argued about markets they clearly understood only through spreadsheets and quarterly reports, not as living economies with unique challenges and innovations. "I've worked with banks in Lagos that developed mobile payment systems years before they became trendy in Silicon Valley," she interjected during a particularly misinformed exchange. "They built solutions around intermittent connectivity and multiple currencies out of necessity. There's valuable architecture there that could inform your global approach." Her perspective shifted the conversation, introducing considerations that wouldn't have been raised if the only voices in the room belonged to those with traditional paths to power. As the session concluded, Maya could see that she had made an impression beyond merely solving the algorithm problem. She had demonstrated a breadth of understanding that came from her unique journey. After the final discussions wrapped up, Phillips approached her with a legal document in hand. "Your consulting fee for today," he said, sliding it across the table. $50,000 for the initial solution, with the remainder of the promised amount contingent on successful global implementation. Maya glanced at the document, noting the additional clauses about confidentiality and future consultation. "I'll need time to review this properly," she said, neither accepting nor rejecting the offer. "Of course," Phillips replied smoothly, "but I hope you'll also consider a more permanent position with Azimuth. Someone with your talents and unique perspective could go far with the right support." She met his gaze directly. "And what position did you have in mind?" "Senior systems architect to start, with a clear path to CTO within 5 years depending on performance." The offer hung in the air between them, far more generous than she would have thought possible that morning, yet still carefully calibrated to be just below what her actual market value might be. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said carefully, "but I'll need to consider all my options." Phillips smiled, but she caught the calculation behind it. "Naturally, just remember who recognized your potential first." As the executives filed out of the ballroom, several handed her their cards or made similar overtures. By the time the room had emptied, Maya found herself alone with a stack of business cards and competing job offers from companies that wouldn't have given her a second glance the day before. She gathered her things slowly, processing the whiplash-inducing change in her circumstances. As she turned to leave, she noticed Eliza Chen lingering by the doorway. "Quite a day," Chen observed, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the lobby. "Surreal," Maya admitted. "They'll all be courting you now," Chen said matter-of-factly. "Competing offers, signing bonuses, accelerated advancement tracks, the works." "I gathered that." Chen stopped, turning to face her directly. Before you make any decisions, remember this. They didn't see your value until it was demonstrated in a way they couldn't ignore. That says more about them than it does about you. Maya considered this. And Rapid Core is different? No company is perfect, Chen admitted with surprising candor. But some of us are actively working to change the system from within. She paused. Your experience today, being overlooked, then suddenly valued when your usefulness became obvious, happens every day to brilliant people who don't fit the expected profile. Maya knew this all too well. And you think I could help change that? I think you've lived it, Chen replied. And that perspective, combined with your obvious brilliance, could be transformative if you're willing to do more than just claim a seat at the table for yourself. With that, Chen nodded goodbye and walked away, leaving Maya to consider implications that went far beyond her individual career trajectory. The day had begun with her invisibly clearing coffee cups and would end with her choosing between competing offers from tech giants. But the most important choice facing her wasn't which company to join. It was what to do with the influence she'd suddenly acquired. As she stepped outside into the evening air, Maya felt the weight of that responsibility settling onto her shoulders. For the first time in 6 years, doors were opening before her. The question now was which one she would choose to walk through, and what she would do once she was inside. The next morning dawned with a clarity Maya hadn't experienced in years. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities that had seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. She stood at the window of her modest apartment, watching the early light transform the neighborhood where she'd built her simplified life. Laundry hanging from balconies, corner stores just raising their security gates, the bus stop where she normally waited each morning to make the commute to the resort. Today she wouldn't be taking that bus. Today she'd be driven back to the Cascade Summit Resort in a company car, not as part of the housekeeping staff, but as a consultant commanding the attention of tech industry titans. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phillips's assistant, confirming that her car would arrive in 30 minutes. Maya moved with purpose, putting on the same navy suit as yesterday, her only option, but pairing it with a silk scarf she'd brought from Lagos, a vibrant pattern that represented her heritage far better than words could. As she gathered her things, her gaze fell on the stack of business cards on her kitchen counter. Each represented a door suddenly flung open, an opportunity from companies that wouldn't have given her a second glance 2 days ago. The irony wasn't lost on her, how nothing about her had changed except their perception. The car arrived precisely on time, a sleek black sedan that drew curious glances from her neighbors. Maya slid into the back seat, feeling the leather cool against her palms. The driver nodded respectfully in the rearview mirror before pulling away from the curb. "Dr. Johnson," he acknowledged, and the sound of her professional title after so long felt like recovering something she'd thought lost forever. The resort lobby looked different through her new lens. No longer a workspace to be maintained, but a professional venue. Staff members who had been her colleagues yesterday now watched with confusion as she strode confidently across the marble floor, no longer in uniform, no longer invisible. Maya, it was Tina pushing a housekeeping cart near the entrance to the East Wing. Her eyes widened as she took in Maya's transformation. My God, it's really true. Everyone's talking about what happened yesterday. Maya paused, suddenly caught between worlds. It's complicated, she said, aware of the driver waiting to escort her to the conference room. You're not coming back, are you? Tina asked, understanding immediately. I don't know yet, Maya admitted honestly. Everything's happening very fast. Tina reached out and squeezed her arm. Well, whatever you decide, you show those suits what you're made of. We'll be cheering for you. The simple gesture of solidarity brought a lump to Maya's throat. These people, the housekeepers, the kitchen staff, the maintenance workers, had been her community during the hardest years of her life. They'd covered shifts when she needed to send extra money home, shared meals when times were tight, celebrated small victories in a world that rarely acknowledged their existence. Thank you, she said softly, making a mental note to find Tina later and explain properly. For now, she continued toward the grand ballroom, where the second day of the summit awaited. The mood in the conference room had shifted noticeably from the previous day. Where there had been skepticism and condescension, there was now a current of wary respect as Maya entered. Several executives who had barely acknowledged her existence now approached with practiced smiles and strategic compliments. Dr. Johnson, called Warren Huffman, intercepting her before she could reach the refreshment table. Yesterday he had dismissed her. Today he wore the ingratiating expression of someone who'd realized his miscalculation. I was hoping we might have a moment to discuss Bridgepoint's quantum computing initiative. Someone with your mathematical background would be an incredible asset to our team. Perhaps later, Maya replied neutrally, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture. She moved past him toward where Eliza Chen was deep in conversation with a younger executive Maya didn't recognize. Chen noticed her approach and made room in their circle. Maya, perfect timing. We were just discussing the challenges of integrating legacy systems in emerging markets. Your insight from yesterday was spot on. The younger executive extended his hand. James Park, CTO of Nexus Platforms. Your observation about mobile banking innovations in West Africa really resonated with me. We're developing similar solutions for Southeast Asian markets. For the next 20 minutes, Maya found herself engaged in the most intellectually stimulating conversation she'd had in years. Park had actual experience implementing systems in developing regions and understood the innovative solutions that emerged from necessity rather than luxury. The most elegant code I've ever seen came from a team working with intermittent electricity and secondhand equipment, he remarked. Constraints breed creativity in ways that unlimited resources never could. Maya nodded, thinking of the brilliant minds she'd known in Lagos. Yet the industry still primarily values contributions from traditional backgrounds and environments, which is precisely why perspectives like yours are so crucial, Park replied. You bridge worlds that rarely communicate effectively. Before Maya could respond, Phillips called the room to order, signaling the start of the day's sessions. As everyone took their seats, Maya noticed a subtle but significant change. She'd been placed at the main table between Chen and Rodriguez, a position that signaled her new status in the group's hierarchy. The morning's discussion focused on implementing her solution across Azimuth's global infrastructure, with detailed presentations on technical challenges and resource allocation. Maya listened attentively, occasionally contributing observations that reflected her unique perspective. During a brief break, she found herself approached by Alexander Whitman, whose mockery the previous day had inadvertently sparked her revelation. "I've been hoping to speak with you," he said, his British accent more subdued than before. "I wanted to extend a proper apology for my behavior yesterday. It was inexcusable." Maya studied him, noting the genuine discomfort behind his polished exterior. "Why did you do it?" she asked simply. The directness of her question seemed to catch him off guard. I suppose I made assumptions based on your role. It was unconscionable arrogance on my part." "It wasn't just arrogance," Maya countered. "It was a system that told you someone like me couldn't possibly have valuable insights. You believed it because it's comfortable to believe." Whitman looked genuinely troubled by her assessment. "You're right, of course. And that's the most insidious part, isn't it? The assumptions we don't even recognize we're making." He hesitated. "I don't expect you to believe this, but your demonstration yesterday has forced many of us to reconsider more than just Azimuth's algorithm." Maya nodded, accepting the apology without offering absolution. As she turned to rejoin the main group, she noticed Diane Rodriguez watching their exchange with interest. "Whitman rarely admits he's wrong," Rodriguez commented as Maya approached. "You've made quite an impression." "One moment of brilliance doesn't change systemic problems," Maya replied. Rodriguez smiled slightly. "No, but it can create openings for those willing to push through them." She nodded toward where Phillips was preparing to reconvene the session. "Have you considered his offer?" "I'm considering several," Maya answered diplomatically. "Smart." Rodriguez handed her a folded note. "My offer is in there. It's more than competitive with whatever Phillips proposed, but that's not why you should consider Meridian." Maya raised an eyebrow. "No? You should consider us because I'm building a team specifically focused on developing technologies for underserved markets. Not as charity, but because there's untapped innovation and profit potential that the rest of the industry is too narrow-minded to see." Rodriguez's eyes gleamed with conviction. "I don't just want your brain, Dr. Johnson. I want your perspective." Before Maya could respond, Phillips called everyone back to their seats. As the afternoon session progressed, she found her attention divided between the technical discussions and the deeper currents moving beneath the surface. Each executive who approached her represented not just a company, but a potential path forward, a different vision of how her reclaimed identity might shape both her future and the industry itself. By late afternoon, the implementation plan for Azimuth's algorithm correction was complete, with Maya's insights incorporated throughout. As the session concluded, Phillips approached her with an envelope. "The board has approved your full consulting fee," he said, handing it to her. 50 million, as promised. Maya stared at the envelope. momentarily stunned by the reality of what it contained. The amount was transformative, enough to secure her mother's medical care indefinitely, to purchase a home outright, to never worry about basic survival again. We've also prepared a formal employment offer, Phillips continued smoothly. The package includes relocation to our Seattle headquarters, stock options, and the senior position we discussed. Maya took the second envelope he offered, aware that several other executives were watching the exchange with calculated interest. "I'd like you to join us for dinner tonight," Phillips added. "Just the senior leadership team, a chance to get to know each other in a less formal setting." She nodded, recognizing the invitation for what it was, both a professional courtesy and a strategic attempt to secure her commitment before competitors could make headway. "Thank you," she said. "What time should I be ready?" 7:30. "The car will collect you from your apartment." Philip smiled, already treating her decision as a foregone conclusion. "We're looking forward to welcoming you properly to the Azimuth family." As the room emptied, Maya remained seated, examining the envelopes in her hands. They represented validation, security, and opportunity, everything she'd been denied for 6 years. Yet something about Phillips's confident assumption troubled her. The Azimuth family had been perfectly content to have her invisibly clearing their coffee cups yesterday. She gathered her belongings and made her way toward the lobby, contemplating the vastly different path her life might take from this point forward. As she passed the service corridor, a familiar voice called her name. "Maya, I've been hoping to catch you." It was Tina, still in her housekeeping uniform, her shift evidently ending. "Some of us are having drinks at Margarita's after work. We wanted to celebrate your big break." She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you're busy with your new colleagues?" Maya felt the weight of the envelopes in her bag. Phillips and his executive team awaited her at an exclusive restaurant, ready to court her with fine wine and promises of professional redemption. Her former co-workers gathered at a modest bar, where they celebrated birthdays and small victories with happy hour specials and genuine camaraderie. In that moment, standing between two worlds, Maya recognized that her true power lay not in choosing one over the other, but in her ability to move between them, to bridge gaps that most people never even perceived. Whatever path she selected moving forward would need to honor both parts of her journey. "I have a dinner commitment at 7:30, she told Tina with a smile. "But I'd love to stop by Margarita's first. I have a lot to tell you all." Margarita's bar and grill buzzed with the energy of people unwinding after long shifts. The walls were adorned with faded sports memorabilia and neon beer signs, a world away from the polished luxury of the resort where most of the patrons worked. Maya pushed through the door at 5:30, still in her navy suit, immediately spotting a group of familiar faces gathered around pushed-together tables in the corner. "There she is," Carlos from maintenance called out, raising his glass. "The genius who showed those executives what's what." A cheer went up from the group. Housekeepers, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, people who, until yesterday, had been her closest colleagues. Maya felt a flush of emotion as she approached their table, suddenly aware of how much these relationships had anchored her during the years when her professional identity had been stripped away. "We got you a drink," Tina said, sliding a margarita across the table as Maya sat down. "First round's on all of us. It's not every day one of our own breaks through the ceiling." "I haven't accepted any offers yet," Maya clarified, though the weight of the envelopes in her bag suggested her decision was merely a formality at this point. "But you will," said Javier, a longtime porter at the resort. "And you should. 6 years I've known you and never once did you belong pushing that cleaning cart." "None of us belong pushing cleaning carts," Maya replied quietly. "We do it because life deals unexpected hands, and we adapt to survive." A momentary hush fell over the table as her words resonated with the group. Each person there had their own story of detours and compromises, of dreams deferred in service of practical necessities. "Tell us what happened," urged Marisol from the kitchen. "Tina said you solved some big computer problem." For the next 20 minutes, Maya recounted the events of the previous day, the missing code element she'd spotted, the shocked reactions, the subsequent offers. She described it all with a mixture of amazement and wry observation that had her friends alternately gasping and laughing. "The look on their faces," she concluded, shaking her head, like they'd seen a dog suddenly start speaking French. "That's because they don't see us as people with brains," Carlos said, tapping his temple. "Just hands that do the work they don't want to do." Maya nodded, thinking of how invisible she'd been in that ballroom until the moment she'd spoken up. The strange thing is, I'm not sure I would have spotted the problem if I hadn't spent the last 6 years being invisible. When people don't think you're watching or listening, you notice things they miss. So what are you going to do? Tina asked, voicing the question everyone was wondering. Which company are you going to pick? Maya sipped her margarita, contemplating. I'm not entirely sure yet. The money is life-changing, but there are bigger considerations. Like what? Javier leaned forward, genuinely curious. Like what kind of impact I want to have, who I want to become. Maya traced the salt rim of her glass. There's part of me that wants to just take the biggest offer and send enough money home to solve all my family's problems. But there's another part that keeps thinking about all the other people like me. Brilliant minds working jobs that don't use their talents because the system doesn't recognize what they have to offer. The table fell quiet again, each person reflecting on their own untapped potential. Whatever you do, Marisol said finally, don't forget about us little people when you're running some big tech company. Maya reached out and squeezed her hand. I could never forget. You were there for me when no one else was. As their gathering continued, Maya found herself storing away these moments. The genuine laughter, the unpretentious solidarity, the shared understanding of struggle that no executive boardroom could ever replicate. These people had seen her at her lowest points and accepted her without condition. Their celebration of her success contained no calculation or strategic positioning. At 6:45, she reluctantly checked her watch. I have to go, she announced. I'm having dinner with the Azimuth executives at 7:30. A chorus of theatrical oohs rose from the table, making her laugh despite the nervousness building in her chest. Wear this, Tina said suddenly, removing a colorful beaded bracelet from her wrist. My grandmother made it in Oaxaca. For strength, you know. So you remember who you are when you're sitting with all those powerful people? Maya's throat tightened with emotion as she accepted the bracelet, sliding it onto her wrist. Thank you, she whispered, embracing her friend. As she said her goodbyes, promising to keep everyone updated, Maya felt a sense of resolution forming within her. The path forward was becoming clearer with each moment, not just about which job to take, but about the kind of leader she wanted to become. The private dining room at Cascade Crest, the resort's 5-star restaurant, presented a stark contrast to Margarita's bar and grill. Crystal glasses caught the light from a modern chandelier, while white-gloved servers moved silently around a table where Gregory Phillips and 7 other Azimuth executives awaited Maya's arrival. She entered precisely on time, the colorful bracelet visible at her wrist, a deliberate choice against the sea of muted designer accessories adorning the other guests. Dr. Johnson, Phillips rose to greet her, gesturing to an empty chair beside him. We're delighted you could join us. Maya nodded politely as she took her seat, noting that she was the only woman and the only person of color in the room. Yesterday, this might have intimidated her. Today, it simply reinforced what she already knew about the industry's homogeneity. We were just discussing the implementation timeline for your algorithm fix, Phillips continued as servers poured wine and presented elaborate appetizers. The initial results have exceeded expectations. Glad to hear it, Maya replied, accepting a glass of water rather than wine. She wanted her mind completely clear for this conversation. For the next hour, discussion flowed between technical matters and more personal inquiries about her background. Maya answered questions about her education and early work in Lagos with measured openness, noting how the executives exchanged impressed glances at her academic credentials. It's remarkable that someone with your qualifications ended up in such different circumstances, commented Victor Hargrove, Azimuth's CFO, delicately avoiding direct mention of her housekeeping role. Is it? Maya asked, meeting his gaze directly. Or is it remarkable that the industry had no mechanisms to identify and utilize talent that doesn't arrive through traditional channels? A momentary silence fell over the table, broken by Phillips's diplomatic laugh. Touché, Dr. Johnson, and precisely the kind of fresh perspective we're eager to bring into our leadership team. He signaled to a server, who presented Maya with a leather portfolio embossed with the Azimuth logo. We've taken the liberty of revising our offer based on the competing proposals you've no doubt received. Maya accepted the portfolio but didn't open it immediately. Before we discuss specifics, I'd like to understand something more fundamental about Azimuth's vision. Phillips nodded encouragingly, though she detected a flicker of impatience behind his polished exterior. Of course. Yesterday, you had 20 of the most brilliant technical minds in the industry trying to solve your algorithm problem. Yet the solution came from someone you all considered invisible. Maya let the observation hang in the air for a moment. What does that tell you about the talent you might be overlooking among your existing workforce? The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Hargrove cleared his throat. Your situation was exceptional. Was it? Maya countered. Or is the exceptional part that circumstances forced you to notice? How many brilliant minds are cleaning your offices, driving your shuttles, or answering your support calls because the system doesn't recognize their potential? Phillips leaned forward, his expression serious. You raise an important point and one that clearly resonates with your personal experience. In fact, improving diversity in our hiring practices is exactly the kind of initiative we'd like you to help lead. Maya recognized the pivot for what it was, a way to channel her challenging question into a manageable corporate initiative. What if I told you I'm more interested in systemic change than in being the exception that proves the rule? I'd say that's precisely why we want you at Azimuth, Phillips replied smoothly, to help us implement that change from the inside. Maya studied him, weighing his sincerity. And if that change requires re-examining fundamental assumptions about talent, credentials, and opportunity, then we'd welcome that examination, Phillips assured her, though several of the other executives looked less convinced. Maya finally opened the portfolio, scanning the revised offer. The numbers were indeed impressive. A salary well above industry standards, substantial equity, and a leadership position that would place her directly in the company's executive orbit. The kind of offer that would have seemed impossible just 3 days ago. Yet as she looked around the table at these men who now courted her favor so assiduously, she couldn't help but remember how they had looked past her, or worse, through her, when she wore a different uniform. This is very generous, she acknowledged, closing the portfolio. And I'm genuinely grateful for the opportunity. But before I make any decisions, I have a proposal of my own. Phillips raised an eyebrow, intrigued. We're all ears. Beyond the personal offer, I'd like to discuss creating a talent identification and development program specifically targeting non-traditional backgrounds. Maya leaned forward, warming to her vision. Not just a diversity initiative, but a fundamental rethinking of how we identify brilliance in places most tech companies never look. An interesting concept, Phillips said carefully, though I'm not sure how practical. What if I told you I know at least 5 people currently working service jobs who have technical training from their home countries that's going completely unutilized? Maya countered. People who could be solving problems for you instead of serving your meals or cleaning your conference rooms. The table fell silent again, but this time with a different quality. Less discomfort, more contemplation. You're proposing we develop a pipeline from service roles to technical positions? Asked Sarah Winters, the one female executive who had joined them late. I'm proposing we stop wasting human potential, Maya clarified, and recognize that brilliance doesn't always arrive in the packages we expect. Phillips exchanged glances with Hargrove, a silent communication passing between them. This could be structured as a special project under your leadership, he offered. A pilot program with metrics we could evaluate after the first year. Maya nodded, recognizing both the opportunity and the limitation in his framing. That would be a start. As the dinner progressed, the conversation evolved into a more concrete discussion of how such a program might work. Maya found herself drawing on both her technical expertise and her lived experience, articulating a vision that bridged worlds rarely in meaningful dialogue. By the time dessert arrived, she could sense a shifting energy among the executives. Most seemed genuinely engaged with the possibilities, while a few remained skeptical but politically savvy enough to voice support for an initiative clearly favored by Phillips. I think we have the outline of something truly innovative here, Phillips concluded as the meal ended. Something that could become a model for the industry, and a perfect platform for your return to the technical world, Dr. Johnson. Maya smiled, aware that he was still primarily focused on securing her talents, with the broader initiative as a means to that end. Yet she also recognized the leverage her sudden value gave her, leverage she could use to open doors for others. As they rose to leave, Phillips placed a hand lightly on her arm. We would need your answer by tomorrow evening, he said quietly. The board is meeting and I'd like to present our complete leadership strategy. I understand, Maya replied, and I appreciate both the offer and your receptiveness to my proposal. I'll have my decision for you tomorrow. As the company car drove her back to her apartment, Maya gazed out the window at the city lights, her mind turning over the possibilities before her. The Azimuth offer promised immediate status and financial security. Rodriguez's Meridian proposal offered a more mission-aligned approach to emerging markets. Chen's rapid core pitch emphasized changing the system from within an already progressive framework. Each represented a different vision of her future, and of the impact she might have on an industry that had both excluded and now sought to claim her. When she arrived home, Maya kicked off her shoes and sat cross-legged on her bed, spreading out the various offer letters before her. The amounts were staggering, life-changing sums that would forever alter her family's trajectory. Yet as she contemplated her choice, it wasn't just the numbers that guided her thinking. It was Tina's bracelet on her wrist, a reminder of community and authenticity. It was the memory of being invisible until she became useful. It was the faces of people still working in the shadows of an industry that failed to recognize their potential. Whatever path she chose, Maya knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would no longer be invisible, and she would use her newly discovered visibility to illuminate others. The algorithm she had fixed was just the beginning of what needed correction in the system. With that clarity, she began to write her response to the offers before her, crafting not just an answer but a vision for what might be possible if the industry truly learned the lesson of her unexpected revelation. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Maya's apartment as she sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her laptop. She'd been up since 4 a.m., methodically analyzing each offer, researching company cultures, and drafting her response. The decision she made today would shape not just her future, but potentially open pathways for others like her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phillips's assistant, politely reminding her about the board meeting at 7 p.m. 3 other similar messages had arrived from representatives of competing companies, each attempting to gauge her leaning without appearing desperate. The tech world operated on information advantages, and right now, Maya's intentions represented valuable intelligence. She ignored them all, focusing instead on finalizing her strategy. After hours of consideration, she'd arrived at a decision that felt right not just professionally but morally. It wasn't the highest offer financially, but it aligned best with the person she wanted to become, someone who could create systemic change rather than just benefiting personally from an exceptional moment. At precisely 10 a.m., Maya sent 3 carefully crafted emails, then closed her laptop with a sense of finality. What happened next would be a test of character, both hers and that of the companies courting her. Her phone rang almost immediately. Phillips, as she'd expected. "Dr. Johnson," he began without preamble when she answered. "I've just read your email. This is an unusual approach." "Yes," Maya acknowledged calmly, "but these are unusual circumstances. You're essentially asking us to enter a bidding war, not over your compensation, but over commitments to this talent development program you've proposed. I'm asking each company to demonstrate how serious they are about addressing the systemic issues we discussed," Maya clarified. "My decision will be based on which organization offers the most compelling and concrete plan for identifying and developing overlooked talent." Phillips's silence conveyed both surprise and calculation. "This is unconventional, to say the least." "So was finding your algorithm solution from a Maid," Maya replied evenly. A short laugh escaped him, genuinely amused despite himself. "Touché, Dr. Johnson. I'll bring this to the board immediately. But I should warn you, some members may view this approach as presumptuous. They're entitled to that opinion," Maya said. "And I'm entitled to evaluate potential employers based on values alignment, not just compensation." After ending the call, Maya checked the time. She had a lunch meeting to prepare for, one that had nothing to do with executive boardrooms or million-dollar offers. "You did what?" Tina nearly choked on her sandwich as Maya explained her strategy at their corner table in the resort's employee cafeteria. Maya had specifically chosen this location for their meeting, wanting to remain grounded in the reality of where she'd come from. "I told them all the same thing, that my decision would be based on which company presents the most comprehensive plan for identifying and developing talent from non-traditional backgrounds." Tina shook her head in amazement. "Girl, most people would have just taken the biggest check and run." "I considered it," Maya admitted, "but then I thought about what would actually make me proud 5 years from now. Would it be the size of my bank account, or knowing I'd helped change the system that nearly buried my potential forever? And you think they'll actually do it? These big companies aren't exactly known for following through on diversity initiatives. That's why I made it concrete. I'm not asking for vague promises about exploring opportunities or fostering inclusion. I want specific commitments, budget allocations, and reporting metrics." Maya took a bite of her salad. "And I made it clear that my acceptance includes a leadership role in implementing whatever program they propose." Tina studied her friend with newfound respect. "You're really playing chess while they're playing checkers." I'm just using the only leverage I have while I have it, Maya replied pragmatically. Today they're desperate to acquire me. Next week, I'll be just another employee, unless I build something more substantial into the agreement. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Maya's phone, an email from Diane Rodriguez of Meridian Software. Maya scanned it quickly, her eyebrows rising in surprise. What? Tina prompted. Rodriguez wants to meet in person this afternoon to discuss her response to my proposal. Says she has some ideas that are better explained face to face. That was fast. Maya nodded thoughtfully, almost like she was already thinking along similar lines. As they finished lunch, Maya realized how much she'd miss these moments with Tina and her other colleagues when she transitioned to a corporate role. These friendships had sustained her through 6 difficult years, providing community when her professional identity had been stripped away. No matter what happens, she said suddenly, we need to stay in touch. This lunch, it becomes a monthly thing, okay? Tina smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze Maya's hand. Absolutely. Someone's got to keep you honest when you're running the world. Meridian Software's local office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, smaller than Azimuth's sprawling campus, but deliberately located in the heart of the city, rather than an isolated corporate park. Maya noted this distinction as the receptionist led her through an open workspace where diverse teams clustered around project boards. Rodriguez was waiting in a glass-walled conference room with panoramic views of the city. Unlike the formal dinner with Phillips, this meeting had a different energy, more collaborative than ceremonial. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Rodriguez said, extending her hand. I was impressed by your approach this morning. Thank you for responding so quickly, Maya replied, taking a seat at the round table where digital tablets had been arranged for each of them. I won't waste your time with pleasantries. Rodriguez began activating her tablet. Your email crystallized something I've been trying to articulate to our board for over 2 years. She turned the screen toward Maya, revealing a detailed presentation titled Untapped Talent Initiative, Reimagining Technical Recruitment. Maya leaned forward, surprised. You've already been working on this? In a limited capacity, yes. We've run pilot programs in our Phoenix and Chicago offices, partnering with community colleges and vocational training centers to identify promising candidates without traditional CS degrees. Rodriguez swiped through several slides showing demographic data and success metrics. The results have been promising, but limited in scope. Your proposal offers an opportunity to scale this approach dramatically. For the next hour, they engaged in a detailed discussion of Meridian's existing efforts and how Maya's vision could expand them. Unlike Phillips's cautious reception, Rodriguez approached the conversation with the enthusiasm of someone who had found an unexpected ally in a long-standing battle. The reality, Rodriguez explained, is that tech has an enormous talent shortage while simultaneously ignoring vast pools of potential. It's not just a moral failing, it's bad business. Maya nodded, increasingly certain she'd found a kindred spirit. The woman who solved your billion-dollar problem was cleaning your conference room. She quoted from her email. How many more solutions are you missing because you can't see past job titles and credentials? Exactly. Rodriguez pulled up a new slide showing a comprehensive framework for talent identification and development. What I'm proposing is this. Meridian creates a dedicated division, not just a program or initiative, but an actual business unit with its own budget and staff, focused on identifying and developing technical talent from non-traditional sources. Maya studied the organizational chart with growing interest. And where would I fit in this structure? Here, Rodriguez pointed to a position labeled Executive Director Talent Innovation, reporting directly to me with a team of 15 to start and authority to implement curriculum, assessment tools, and partnership strategies. The role described was substantial, far more than the special project Phillips had suggested. It represented not just inclusion in the executive structure, but actual power to drive change. And the board has approved this? Maya asked, knowing how corporations typically responded to initiatives that challenged established practices. Conditionally, Rodriguez admitted, based on your acceptance. But I've been laying the groundwork for months, making the business case beyond the ethics argument. The truth is, we're leaving money on the table by limiting our talent pool to traditional candidates who all think alike. As Rodriguez continued outlining the proposal, Maya felt a growing sense that this opportunity aligned with her deeper purpose far better than the others. Whereas Phillips had framed her initiative as a side project to secure her technical skills, Rodriguez positioned it as a strategic business imperative in which Maya's lived experience was as valuable as her mathematical brilliance. "One more thing," Rodriguez said as their meeting approached its conclusion. "I'm not just offering this because of your algorithm solution. I've reviewed your academic work from Lagos and MIT. Your research on mathematical modeling of complex social systems is directly relevant to what we're trying to build." Maya blinked in surprise. None of the other executives had mentioned her actual research, only her credentials and her recent moment of brilliance. "You read my dissertation? And your papers on predictive modeling in resource-constrained environments," Rodriguez confirmed. "Your technical brilliance is indisputable, but it's your perspective on systems, both technological and social, that makes you uniquely qualified to lead this initiative." As Maya left the Meridian offices an hour later, she felt a clarity that had been missing from her previous deliberations. Rodriguez hadn't just matched her demands. She'd revealed an existing commitment to the very changes Maya hoped to create. It wasn't perfect, and corporate interests would always create tension with idealistic goals, but it represented the most promising path among her options. Her phone buzzed with a text from Phillips, requesting a meeting before the board presentation. Maya replied that she'd be available at 5 p.m., giving him one last opportunity to present Azimuth's response to her challenge. The contrast between her meetings with Rodriguez and Phillips couldn't have been starker. Where Rodriguez had come prepared with a comprehensive plan already aligned with Maya's vision, Phillips arrived at their hotel lobby meeting with a hastily assembled presentation that positioned her talent initiative as a corporate social responsibility project rather than a core business function. "The board is enthusiastic about the concept," Phillips explained, his polished confidence slightly diminished compared to their previous interactions. "We're prepared to allocate an annual budget of $5 million and give you oversight of the program's development." Maya nodded, keeping her expression neutral as she reviewed the materials. "And the reporting structure? You'd work with our HR and diversity teams with quarterly updates to the executive committee." Phillips leaned forward. "But Maya, your primary value to Azimuth would still be your technical brilliance. We don't want to distract you with too many administrative responsibilities." She noted his shift to her first name, a subtle attempt to establish rapport and influence. "So the talent initiative would be secondary to my technical role?" "I wouldn't frame it that way," Phillips hedged. "Let's say we want to leverage your unique abilities across multiple domains." Maya closed the presentation folder. "Thank you for putting this together so quickly. I appreciate the board's willingness to consider my proposal." Phillips studied her, his experienced executive's intuition detecting her reserved response. "Meridian made a more aggressive offer for the initiative, didn't they?" She met his gaze directly. "I've agreed not to discuss specifics between competing offers." "Of course." He nodded, recalibrating. "But perhaps you could give me a sense of what aspects might strengthen our proposal before the board meeting. We're very committed to making this work, Dr. Johnson." The shift back to her title wasn't lost on Maya. "What would strengthen the proposal," she said carefully, "would be positioning this initiative as a strategic business imperative rather than a charitable project. The talent is there. The question is whether Azimuth truly understands its value." Phillips absorbed this feedback with a pensive expression. "I see. Well, we still have a few hours before the board meeting. Perhaps we can revisit some elements of our approach." As he gathered his materials to leave, Phillips paused. "You know, when I first saw you solve that algorithm problem, I thought we discovered a diamond in the rough, a singular exception to the rule. But you're suggesting something more fundamental, aren't you? That the rules themselves need re-examination." "Yes," Maya confirmed simply. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." Phillips nodded slowly. "It's a provocative thesis, and one that challenges many assumptions our industry has operated on for decades. Sometimes provocative theses lead to breakthrough innovations," Maya replied. "Isn't that what tech is supposed to be about?" A smile touched Phillips's lips, rueful but genuine. "Touché, Dr. Johnson." Again. After he departed, Maya remained in the lobby reflecting on the difference between the two approaches. Phillips saw her initiative as an accommodation, a concession to secure her technical talents. Rodriguez viewed it as an alignment of values and strategic interests. The choice was becoming increasingly clear. By 6 p.m., Maya had made her decision. She sent a brief, carefully worded email to both Phillips and Chen, thanking them for their offers but declining in favor of a position that better aligned with her professional goals. To Rodriguez, she sent a separate message accepting the role at Meridian, contingent on the terms they'd discussed. At 6:30 p.m., she changed into a simple black dress, purchased that morning with her first advance from the consulting fee, and called a rideshare to take her to the Azimuth board meeting. Though she'd declined their offer, Phillips had still requested she make a brief appearance to formally conclude their discussions. It was a professional courtesy she felt obligated to honor. As the car wove through evening traffic, Maya touched the colorful beaded bracelet Tina had given her, a reminder of where she'd been and the community that had sustained her. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in her journey, but she was determined not to forget the path that had led her here. Her phone chimed with a message from Rodriguez. Board unanimously approved the initiative structure and budget. We're ready to move forward whenever you are. Welcome to Meridian. Maya smiled, feeling a sense of purpose settle over her. The algorithm she'd corrected had changed her life, but the system she was about to help build might change many others. It wasn't just about claiming her own seat at the table anymore. It was about redesigning the table itself. 1 year later, Maya stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Cascade Summit Resort, the very same room where her journey had begun, with a glance at a whiteboard and a quiet observation that changed everything. Today, however, she wasn't dressed in a maid's uniform or even the hastily purchased suit from her job interviews. She wore a tailored burgundy dress that projected both confidence and approachability, qualities she'd come to value in her new role. Welcome to the first annual Untapped Potential Conference, she began, looking out at the diverse audience of over 300 attendees. A year ago, I stood in this very room as someone invisible to most of you, a person whose capabilities were obscured by a uniform and assumptions about who belongs in which roles. The crowd included executives from major tech companies, community college educators, workforce development specialists, and, most importantly to Maya, 50 graduates of Meridian's Talent Innovation Program. These graduates, many of whom had previously worked in service roles or other positions that underutilized their abilities, now represented the program's first successful cohort. The algorithm problem that launched this journey was simple compared to the system we're working to redesign today, Maya continued, but in both cases, the solution begins with recognizing what's missing and having the courage to speak up when you see it. From her position on stage, Maya could see familiar faces in the audience. Diane Rodriguez sat in the front row, the executive who had taken a chance on not just Maya's brilliant mind but her transformative vision. Tina and several former colleagues from the resort had special reserved seats in the third row, guests of honor who had supported Maya long before her dramatic rise. Even Gregory Phillips from Azimuth Technologies was present, having eventually recognized the strategic value in supporting the initiative he had initially underestimated. In our first year, the Talent Innovation Program identified and developed 53 technologists who might otherwise have remained in roles that never utilized their full capabilities, Maya reported, advancing to a slide showing the program's results. 92% have successfully transitioned to technical positions, with performance reviews placing them in the top quartile of their teams. A wave of appreciative murmurs moved through the audience. These weren't just feel-good diversity statistics. They represented measurable business value that resonated with even the most pragmatic executives. But perhaps the most powerful testament comes not from metrics, but from individual stories, Maya continued, gesturing to the graduates seated together in their section. Like Carlos Mendoza, who maintained complex HVAC systems for 15 years while teaching himself network architecture at night. Or Aisha Washington, who applied her physics degree from Nigeria to optimize kitchen operations while her international credentials went unrecognized. Maya paused, making eye contact with her former colleagues. These brilliant minds were hiding in plain sight, serving your coffee, maintaining your facilities, preparing your meals, while their potential remained untapped. The question we must ask ourselves is not just how many Carlos Mendozas and Aisha Washingtons have we overlooked, but how many innovations, solutions, and breakthroughs have we missed because of it. As Maya continued her presentation, detailing the program's methodology and expansion plans, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The past year had been intense, building the initiative from the ground up, developing assessment tools that looked beyond traditional credentials, creating partnerships with community organizations, and perhaps most challenging, convincing skeptical executives that this wasn't merely a social project, but a competitive advantage. There had been resistance, of course. Some managers questioned the qualifications of program graduates, holding them to higher standards than traditional hires. Others saw the initiative as a distraction from core business objectives. But the results spoke for themselves. The program graduates brought diverse perspectives that repeatedly led to creative solutions and innovations. As we look to the future, Maya concluded, Meridian Software is proud to announce that we're open sourcing the Talent Innovation Program methodology and assessment tools. This isn't just about building a competitive advantage for one company. It's about transforming how our entire industry identifies and develops talent. The announcement triggered a spontaneous round of applause. Open sourcing the program had been Maya's most ambitious goal, one that Rodriguez had initially resisted, but eventually championed to the board as a way to position Meridian as an industry leader in talent innovation. And to support this industry-wide transformation, Maya continued once the applause subsided, Meridian is establishing a $10 million fund to help smaller companies implement similar programs. Because talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not, and it's time we change that equation. As Maya wrapped up her keynote and invited the first panel of speakers to join her on stage, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The algorithm problem that had catapulted her back into the technical world had been solved in seconds, but this deeper systemic challenge would require years of sustained effort. Yet already she could see the ripple effects spreading. Lives changed, perspectives shifted, possibilities expanded. The panel discussion featured 3 program graduates alongside talent acquisition leaders from major tech companies. Maya moderated the conversation, guiding it toward practical implementation strategies while ensuring the graduates' voices remained central to the dialogue. Before we came to Meridian, Aisha Washington explained to the audience, most of us had stopped even applying for technical roles. The constant rejections wear you down until you start to believe maybe you don't belong in those spaces. Carlos Mendoza nodded in agreement. I had 15 years of practical systems experience but 0 callbacks because my resume said maintenance technician instead of systems engineer, as the program didn't give me new skills. It gave me the opportunity to demonstrate the skills I already had. After the panel, Maya moved through the conference, connecting with participants and facilitating introductions between executives and program graduates. She spotted Alexander Whitman, the British CEO whose mockery had inadvertently sparked her revelation a year earlier, engaged in serious conversation with 2 program graduates. Dr. Johnson, he acknowledged as she approached, your graduates were just explaining how they adapted your assessment methodology for UK applications. Quite impressive. Maya nodded, noting how different his tone was from their first encounter. Respectful rather than condescending. We're finding that the principles translate across cultural contexts, though the implementation requires local adaptation. Indeed, my board has approved a pilot based on your open source framework. We're starting with 20 positions next quarter. Such conversations repeated throughout the day, with executives who had initially viewed the program with skepticism now seeking to implement versions of it within their own organizations. Maya took particular satisfaction in these exchanges, recognizing them as evidence that the industry was beginning to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about talent. During a brief break between sessions, Maya found herself alone with Tina in a quiet corner of the reception area. So, Tina said, gesturing around at the bustling conference, is this everything you hoped it would be when you turned down all those fancy job offers? Maya considered the question thoughtfully. It's more than I imagined, actually. I thought I was choosing between personal success and systemic change. What I discovered is that approaching success differently created more possibilities than I initially recognized. Well, we're all proud of you, Tina replied, touching the beaded bracelet that Maya still wore on her wrist. Though we miss having you around sometimes. I miss you all too, Maya admitted. That's why our monthly lunches are non-negotiable in my schedule. Some of the executives can't understand why I prioritize those meetings above everything else. Because they've never been invisible, Tina said simply. Maya nodded, recognizing the profound truth in those words. Her experience of invisibility, painful as it had been, had given her insights that many of her colleagues had never had to develop. It had taught her to see people and possibilities that others overlooked, to recognize value in unexpected places, and to understand systems from multiple perspectives simultaneously. As the afternoon sessions began, Maya returned to the main ballroom where Gregory Phillips was delivering a surprisingly candid presentation about Azimuth's initial resistance to and eventual adoption of a modified version of the Meridian program. We missed an extraordinary opportunity when Dr. Johnson was working in our conference rooms, he acknowledged to the audience. Not just because she solved our immediate problem, but because her perspective could have transformed our approach to innovation much earlier. The lesson we've taken from this is that expertise and insight exist throughout our ecosystem, not just in the places we've been trained to look. Maya listened from the back of the room, appreciating Phillips's evolution, while recognizing it was driven by both ethical recognition and competitive necessity. Meridian's success with the program had created pressure for other companies to follow suit or risk losing access to an expanding talent pool. The final session of the day featured a panel of program graduates now leading their own teams, sharing how their diverse pathways had influenced their management approaches. Maya watched with particular pride as they fielded questions with confidence and authority, their previous experiences as outsiders informing more inclusive leadership styles. As the conference drew to a close, Maya returned to the podium for brief closing remarks. Looking out at the assembled participants, executives who had once overlooked her, colleagues who had always seen her potential, and graduates forging new paths, she felt the full circle moment with powerful clarity. A year ago in this room, 20 of the brightest minds in tech failed to solve a problem that was ultimately resolved by someone they considered invisible, she reminded the audience. Today, we've begun to correct that systemic oversight, but our work isn't finished. For every person in this room whose potential has been recognized, there are thousands still waiting for their moment of visibility. She touched the colorful bracelet on her wrist, drawing strength from its connection to her journey. The question isn't whether brilliance exists in unexpected places. We've proven that beyond doubt. The question is whether we have the wisdom and courage to create systems that illuminate that brilliance, rather than obscuring it. That is our challenge moving forward. As applause filled the room, Maya felt a deep sense of purpose and possibility. The algorithm she had fixed was just a symptom of a much larger system in need of correction, a system she was now positioned to help redesign. Her journey from invisible to influential hadn't just changed her own trajectory, it was beginning to transform the very industry that had once failed to see her. And in that transformation lay the true solution to the problem she'd been born to solve. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. Your support keeps these true-to-life stories alive.